is a 2014 graduate of Texas A&M with a degree in chemical engineering. He currently works for Air Liquide in Houston. Air Liquide is a multinational company that's is a supplier of industrial gases. So they manufacture and supply. It's a big company. If you've never heard of them. So Josh has been working for Air Liquide since he got out of college. Grew up in Abilene, Wiley. His dad's the superintendent of the Wiley School District, and he's my son-in-law. So we're proud. I'm very glad that he is coming in to address us. And he and my daughter, our daughter, are about to have a baby here anytime. So if he has to get up and leave real early, that might be the reason. So anyway, Josh, take it away. I'm going to throw it to you, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Lackey. I'm really excited to be here to talk with y'all. Mr. Lackey introduced me pretty well there. One thing that he didn't have the chance to mention is that I actually had the opportunity to go to RILA, the Rotary Youth Leadership Camp in high school, and so that was a great development opportunity, and really appreciate all the work that Rotary does to host that program every year. Let me bring up my slides here. Can y'all see my screen okay? Is that a yes? I hope. Okay, sounds good. So Mr. Lackey hit the nail on the head. Air Liquide is a French multinational company. We're right outside the global Fortune 500, so not enormous, but definitely a sizable company. You can tell from the name it's a French company, and we got our start by separating air into its liquid forms of nitrogen and oxygen, and so Air Liquide's a derivative of the words liquid and air in French. So today, a lot of our business in the U.S. is large plants that supply oxygen and nitrogen, and in pipelines along the Gulf Coast to a lot of different refineries. We'll also have plants that go on site at refineries or chemical plants that are not on our pipelines. And through that business, we got involved with hydrogen because a lot of these major chemical and refinery manufacturers require hydrogen for their processes. Through kind of the French worldview, we've been involved with hydrogen energy from a pretty early stage. And so I've had the privilege the past 6 years, or about the first 3 years of my job, I was really in our larger plants, and then transitioned over to our hydrogen energy group. And I've been working there since. I really play more of a technical role. So a lot of the marketing numbers in this presentation are a little bit, I don't have them in the back of my brain. So I may not have some answers off the top of my head if you'll have questions as we go along, but have really enjoyed developing technology and solutions as we move forward to develop hydrogen as an energy vector. So Air Liquide noticed that there was an energy transition occurring, and with that energy transition, there were a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. A big reason why, let me hide this real quick. I'll just move it to this. A big reason why Air Liquide's interested in the energy transition is really to reduce our impact on the environment by reducing carbon emissions. Something that I always think gets left out of the value of an energy transition to a clean fuel like hydrogen is also the energy independence. So there's of course a really great for the environment part of reducing the carbon dioxide emissions, but also moving ourselves away from the need to import oil and things like that. So hydrogen's role in the energy transition is very important because it does produce no emissions at the point of use. And so in the car, where it's used in a fuel cell, the emission is water. And then if you burn hydrogen for heating purposes, again, the emission is water. So there's a lot of different applications for hydrogen, and all of these applications, using green hydrogen will be a way of reducing the carbon emissions from that process. So as I mentioned, there's the energy transition for like mobility, where we're using a fuel cell in a vehicle, but then also heating, using the hydrogen actually to burn it, using it as a heat source, and then replacing hydrogen in the chemical manufacturing process with green hydrogen. So I'm going to grab it. And hydrogen has a lot of growth potential. There's a lot of numbers up here that are large, and it's for 2050. But really, the number I want to focus on is the 18% of final energy demand. And so, whenever we think of final energy demand, like electricity that you're using in your house or gas that you're burning in your vehicle, gasoline, hydrogen is expected to be 20% of this energy demand. A lot of that being in mobility applications, but that is an enormous growth potential from where we are today. And Air Liquide and a lot of other companies are working to make sure that we can get to that point. So being kind of a newer energy vector, there's a lot of pros and cons to weigh about hydrogen. So this slide just goes through a few of them. Of course, we talked about the carbon footprint, but because it's a chemical that's carrying the energy, a molecule, this can be transported just like gasoline could to many different spaces. And so, of course, you don't have to run an electrical line everywhere you go. That's the most important parts of that. And then the industry of hydrogen energy is really developing from our traditional hydrogen business. And in our traditional hydrogen business, as I mentioned to you before, we are supporting chemical manufacturers, refineries, but also we've supported industry through providing molecules to electronics manufacturers, like at fabs, and the space industry. And we're very involved with the European space industry, and are getting more involved with NASA. So whenever we talk about the scale, and I know I mentioned that 20% of final energy use before, it's interesting to note the different areas just in mobility that we're focusing on for this slide. And so there's already a lot of cars, individual consumer vehicles in California, and those consume, the stations consume 100 to 200 kilograms a day. And that area is continuing to grow, but there's a lot of other really exciting solutions that are developing as well. And for me, one of the most exciting are the semi trucks, because to be honest, batteries are not a good solution to propel the semi truck because of their low energy density, high weight, and hydrogen fuel cells are going to play a really key role to decarbonize the heavy duty sector. Okay, I want to show y'all real quickly how fuel cells work, because I know one thing that Mr. Lackey, one of the first things he always asked was, how does hydrogen actually work? What does the engine look like? And so I want to pause before I transition to that, see if y'all have any questions.
Yeah, how do you get hydrogen? How much energy does it take to separate hydrogen?
That's a great question, and there's a few different ways of doing it that are going to have various efficiencies. The most energy efficient way is not the cleanest way, but that's through steam methane reforming. And so you take water and methane, both of which have quite a few hydrogen atoms in their molecule, and you react hydrogen and water over a catalyst. You react methane and water over a catalyst at high temperatures, and that breaks down those molecules, and basically you go through a couple more reactions, and all the hydrogens from those molecules combine, and you get elemental hydrogen. And then another process is electrolysis, and this is really known as one of the green ways of producing hydrogen. It does take a lot of electricity, but a lot of the electricity that it's using is often electricity that couldn't be used because of like intermittency of renewables. So that's one value for that electricity as we see renewables penetrate the grid as a production method for electricity. We're going to need ways to store that energy, and so we can use it whenever the renewables are not producing. And then there are a couple of other interesting ways of producing hydrogen. People have been looking into incineration of trash and capturing basically all the hydrogen atoms from incinerating trash. So if there aren't any more questions, I'll go to the fuel cell.
Anybody in person here have any questions? I was just going to field any questions in case you have any, so we can hear them. Okay, we're good to go. Thank you.
All right. So we work with Toyota a lot, and I found this video of Matt McClory, an engineer who I work with, explaining how fuel cells work. And there is a trick to sharing your audio. I don't know if I'm sharing it right now in Zoom.
No, it didn't.
Okay.
Go ahead and try.
Share sound. That's how I'll do it. Okay. Now we'll try.
That's why I talked to Matt McClory, an engineer with Toyota who is here today at CES.
Well, at a very high level, it's an electrochemical engine where you can directly convert energy into electricity, right? In this case, we use hydrogen as a fuel combined with oxygen from air, and we directly convert that in an electrochemical cell into electricity that allows us to drive the electric motor for the wheels.
All right, now correct me if I've got this wrong, but as I recall, when you combine hydrogen and oxygen, besides the generation of electricity, you end up with water.
Exactly. So the way the membrane works is that you get hydrogen from one side onto the fuel side, and that gets split up on the side of the membrane into a proton and an electron. But the membrane is an electron barrier, but a proton carrier. And so the proton can go through the membrane to the other side, but the electron has to take an external path. When it takes that external path, it goes through the traction motor. That allows you to drive the car. When the electron comes back the other side on the air side, it combines with the proton and the oxygen from air, and it makes water.
So that's it. You've got hydrogen on one side, oxygen on the other, and you end up with electricity and water vapor, no carbon.
Great. Yeah. And so that's kind of a high level view of how a fuel cell works, and then how it looks in a car is even a little bit different than that. So I wanted to pull up this graphic to just show you how it actually might look in the or how it does look in the vehicle. And so you start with that fuel cell stack that they just talked about. You put a lot of those together in different layers, and that's what creates a high voltage that's going to produce electricity you can store in your battery or run the motor. So there's quite a few components. Of course, you have to have the hydrogen tanks in the vehicle, a battery, and then the fuel cell stack and the electric motor. This was a graphic published by Hyundai, so it's more focused on their layout. Toyota's is just a little bit different, but the same methodology. And then the vehicle's propelled through a couple different modes. Of course, the fuel cell's making electricity, so the hydrogen can go to the fuel cell, make that electricity, and directly power the motor. There can be the process of the fuel cell making electricity to power the motor along with the battery powering the motor. The fuel cell can charge the battery directly, or the motor, while braking, can charge the battery. And so there are a lot of efficiencies from a fuel cell vehicle. First of all, is the conversion of hydrogen to electricity is a lot more efficient than an internal combustion engine. And then second of all, there's like all the regenerative braking and other aspects of this vehicle. Whenever we look at fuel cells, they kind of fall in a really nice position whenever you compare them to batteries, because of their ability to fill up quickly, but also they of course have no emissions. They're quiet because it is still an electric vehicle. And so it's kind of a nice position, taking in this graphic shows it taking in the positive aspects of an internal combustion engine and the positive aspects of an electric vehicle without the limitations. And something that always gets brought up is safety of the vehicles. Toyota is a notoriously conservative company, and they have definitely applied that methodology when developing their fuel cell electric vehicles, and so have we on the equipment supply side for the hydrogen stations. So there's a lot of testing to make sure that this entire system is pretty foolproof. Okay. So that was the interlude I wanted to go into real quick to talk about the fuel cells. The fuel cells aren't what we do, but they're such an important part of how you use the hydrogen that I wanted to be sure that we talked about it briefly. And then to talk a little bit more about what Air Liquide does. So here we are with the other industrial gas companies. There's a lot of people in this space because there's a lot of roles that need to be filled. There's the car manufacturers down here, small equipment manufacturers, and then some other companies that they may be aware of, Shell, Total, and the oil and gas companies who are getting into this space as we speak. Air Liquide's has already started investing, and is continuing to invest. This slide deck is from 2018, and so at this point we were really heavily investing in stations in order to develop the demand. As we've grown, we have found companies that are really good at managing the stations, and so we've invested there and continued to make larger investments in the supply chain. So primary production of hydrogen, and then the supply chain from the primary production to all these stations. So you can see here that Air Liquide's involved all over the world. So we'll go through each geography really quickly. One of the highest demand sources for hydrogen is actually forklifts. There's a company called Plug Power who we work closely with. They make the fuel cells for the forklifts, but then also operate the hydrogen site at the customer's location. But Amazon, Walmart, both have enormous contracts with Plug Power, and that space is expected to grow very strongly in the future. This is a site in Europe that they show in the pictures. And then for the stations, Air Liquide built a network in the Northeast of the US, and let's see here. Sorry about that. We worked with Toyota to develop this, and so that they could roll out some cars up there. I don't know if y'all pay attention to the hydrogen space or not, but these stations are not open yet, and there were a lot of barriers from the government, and so the government said they wanted zero emission vehicles, but then they said you can't drive them in tunnels, over bridges, things like this, and so it's been a bit of a frustrating project in the Northeast as we try to help the states get to their goals, and also have to deal with their own barriers. So that's an ongoing process that we're hoping to get very close to finishing soon. And then in California, Air Liquide owns and operates 4 stations, but right now there's 46 stations in California, and there's also quite a few under construction. And so whenever the ones under construction are complete, there will be 100 stations, and that should definitely be before 2023. So I was glad to see that this presentation, which is from, like I mentioned, 2018, has 94 stations by 2023. So there's a lot of progress in California, thanks mostly to the ZEV mandate, zero emission vehicle mandate, and then also the California Energy Commission has provided a lot of funding for hydrogen stations. On the left here is one of the very first fuel cell electric semi trucks made. This is definitely a prototype version, and so if you were to look on the inside, there's wires going everywhere because Toyota was developing the semi truck with their fuel cells. Since then, there's continued to be a lot of progress, and as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the heavy duty sector seems to be a space where hydrogen is a really valuable fuel because it allows them to keep their payload and be a zero emission vehicle. There's a lot of activity also in Asia. Japan, Korea, and China are developing hydrogen for their vehicles. And then something that I probably won't talk about much today is the role that hydrogen can play for energy storage. I talked a little bit about renewables and their intermittency. Air Liquide has this project in Denmark where we're converting energy from the grid into hydrogen and then using that in industry. That's kind of the first half of an energy storage system. But I was at a DOE conference 2 weeks ago, and this is one of the projects that they reference for energy storage. And then we have Europe, where there's a lot of different activities as well. In France, Air Liquide helped drive the fuel cell electric vehicle vehicles by buying a taxi fleet of fuel cell electric vehicles, and we fill them from our stations. And so Air Liquide has some ownership in Hype, which is the company that runs this taxi fleet. So this took a lot of coordination, and Air Liquide started what Air Liquide is the founding member of the Hydrogen Council. It's a council that had 39 members, and today it has over 90 members. These are companies who are heavily involved in the hydrogen space. And I was interested to note that they pledged $300 billion in projects in the project pipeline. So obviously huge investments. And some companies that if it would go back to the beginning, you'd be pretty familiar with their names. So it was important to get everyone together on this mission, and so that we could develop this hydrogen energy space effectively. And we're well on the way with that. Whenever COVID happened, a lot of the stimulus bills had measures for green energy, and part of that green energy is always hydrogen. So went a bit long, but I want to make sure there's time for questions. And then I don't know if anyone has thoughts about what hydrogen energy may mean for Marble Falls, but be happy to talk about that. There's some DOE projects in Texas for hydrogen energy. One of those is at UT. But are there any questions?
I do have a question so I work in the collision industry, and my question is, I saw in the vehicle, I'm not sure if you would know this or not, but how are the hydrogen tanks, are they stable enough to hold up to an impact?
Yeah. And so I do know that because hydrogen cylinders are a key part of industrial gas manufacturers' expertise. And so Air Liquide takes a lot of pride in this, as well as the auto manufacturers. But there's a lot of different standards in the Compressed Gas Association in the US, ISO standards for around the world. But basically, those are what's called a Type 4 cylinder. And so it's carbon fiber spirals around an inner metallic core. And so that's how it's made. And then for testing, they have a burst pressure that's going to be 4 times higher than their rated pressure. And they undergo a bonfire test where the cylinder's put on a bonfire, and they make sure that it doesn't rupture catastrophically. And then they do a collision test where they actually make an impact onto the cylinder and to see how it fails.
Okay.
And then another test they do is shooting it with a high caliber round to make sure that it fails appropriately. So
Okay, yeah, I was curious about like if there was a puncture test, and yeah, obviously there is. So that high powered rifle that would, or high caliber impact would definitely be a puncture test for sure.
Thanks for giving us that information. That's pretty technical, and some of that really, I mean, a lot of that goes, but I think it's fascinating what's going on in your work, and dang, it makes me proud to have you do that. So
yeah, it's a pleasure. I tried to go pretty fast. A lot of it's exciting for me, and like I said, I'm more on the technical side, so I'm not always used to explaining it very well. So, but it was fun for me too, because I work in it all the time, but also I really enjoy the topic. So thank you for having me today.
well, thanks a lot, and keep us posted today, okay?
Yes.
Oh,
Papa Grande, PG, yeah. Well, congratulations, Josh. Is this your first child?
Yeah, it is going to be.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
She is going to be, yeah. So we're gonna have a little girl soon.
That's very good to hear, and congratulations. I hope everything goes well, and she has a nice and easy delivery.
All right. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great Tuesday.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, sir.
thanks, Josh.
All right. So is there any other Rotary business or anything we need to go over? Again, we have the skeet shoot this afternoon, 6:30 on Zoom. Becky, you got everything you needed answered, right?
For now, I
Okay.
did, yeah.
Okay. Good deal. All right. Any news on Ryla? Nothing new. Moving along. All right. Good deal. All right. Well, I believe if we don't have any other questions or anything to go over, we got a 4-way test to do. It's up there. All right. Steve, can you lead us in the 4-way test, sir?
4-way test for the
Things we think, say, or do. Is it true?
The truth.
Spirit of
Spirit
all
of all
concerned. Will
To
build goodwill and better friendships.
will
Will
be
be beneficial
beneficial
to all concerned.
Concerned. Ding, ding. Oh, yes. Yeah. And everybody say hi to Jim. He kind of snuck in on us.